Welcome to Kubernetes SIG Apps for Monday, June 3rd, 2019. Before we get started, I'll go ahead and paste the meeting minutes URL in to chat so anybody can follow along with the minutes or the agenda and you can see what we have going on. Hi, I'm Matt Farina. I'll be chairing today. We don't have any announcements this week. Although I do think code freeze moved. I didn't grab the update this morning to when that happened, but we are in the midst of 1.15, getting that stuff done. So we don't have any real announcements. And so with that, I think the first thing we have up is Tom here to talk about, is it Kubrig?
Yeah, Kubrig, yes.
All right, and so we have a demo to kick us off. The floor is yours, go ahead.
Sure. So I've been working with OpenShift Kubernetes for the last year on a project, and while it was still a very small project with only 5 deployments or so, we were just running into a lot of issues with YAML and maintaining it, and we were just basically having 5 different environments with sort of 3 environments production-like and 2 environments for development. And so the deployment was a little bit different. And because of that, I have started working on Kubrig, a side project that basically generates Kotlin DSL based on the API specifications. I'll start sharing and show you guys a little bit what I've done already. So that's for later. Let's just show the GitHub. So we first have a project that's basically generating DSL, and you get something like this. So it's very one-on-one with the YAML files, some tweaks here and there, but because it's Kotlin, you can easily extend it with your own shortcuts if you like. And I'm generating this for both Kubernetes and for OpenShift. So you have a very fluent way of mapping YAML to real code and do smarter things with it. You'll also see that I'm kind of generating this already for a bunch of Kubernetes versions, 100 plus, I think. Last versions, they caused me some headaches because the generation failed. Some things that tripped over or were invalid for Kotlin. And then also for OpenShift, this is basically just taking the Kubernetes stacks from GitHub and it tries to generate a DSL. Same for OpenShift. And then straight to the tool that's really using the DSL, Kubrig. So it's a Gradle plugin. I don't know if you guys are Java-based or only Go or something else. I'm Java myself, so Kotlin is very close to the Java world, I'd say. Why Gradle? I've been a committer, and also it's very extendable. So you've got the Kubrig tool on itself, and on the job, also configuring reverse proxies in the DMZ. So I'm just extending. It's easy to extend. And in the end, what Kubrig does is it allows you to define resources with an annotation, and then you just have a function. And it's just your the kind name plus DSL, and then you have your return type, and then you have a function that you can use to define the complement. And from here on out, it's basically one-on-one with the YAML that you know. And I'll give a short show you how it looks like in the editor. Yeah, if you guys have questions, just pop in and shout. So this, because it's Kotlin, you basically always know what you're dealing with. So I also had added some helper functions to get in a text file or a binary file or whatever. So you can keep working with your in editor highlighting and support for files. And this was not something that was very annoying for me. Also with dealing with the YAML and the secrets, because it's base 64 encoded. So yeah, it's easier to do it with this. You can just do include the file here, and that's it. We also yeah, that's just handy to do it. I'm not sure how it's done with Helm and so on. So that's DSL part. I'm not sure if this is clear for you. The one-on-one mapping.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you guys don't know Gradle, I'm just gonna skip all the Gradle stuff because you can find that online. It's just you get a small fragment in the build. That's where you say I'm using Kubernetes version this or OpenShift version this. And then you get the DSL in your code, so you don't really have to specify much to get going. If you look at the directory structure, the kids are shouting outside. I'm going to close the door real quick. So by default, there's something like multi-environment support. So get environment and then your local environment. I'm just using Minikube now, and you can have as many as you need. For us on the project now, we've got like 5 environments: development, test, acceptance, experience, and production, with varying levels of production likeness. So you can easily just create a new directory and start on a new environment. I'm thinking like what we do. We run a database inside OpenShift for development and testing, and for acceptance and so on, it's external. So those are a little different in that they have either services that just an IP endpoint external, or it's a service inside one. So that's something that you can also easily do. You can just say filter, and then you just specify all the environments that you want this resource to be included in. For example, this. Also, something that's a hot topic, I think, is how do you manage your secrets? I'm using Google Think library to generate keys. Need to extend the integration further because it also allows you to rotate keys and also use KMS in Google and AWS. And basically, with this key, we can have files that are encrypted or properties. So just key value based things. So for example, here, if you initiate in an environment, you also get the API server URL encrypted in the config file for that environment, and you can have files encrypted. I'm just using a very simple strategy here. It's just prefixing file names. I haven't come up with anything better because how can you be sure to have a valid detection of what is a secret? I haven't found one yet, so it's just prefix your file name with plain. And let's say it's a private key, whatever. Something like that. And then you can just get the encrypted version. So there are, because it's Gradle, we can do something like dynamic tasks. So we can just generate all the tasks that we have for each environment. So we can specifically run deployments, encryption, decryption, something like that. So you can say, okay, I want to encrypt everything from my local environment, and it will just create encrypted version, and that's some behind stuff. And I've checked with the Google team guys, and I'm using a safe enough level of encryption to be able to store it in Git. And they're just encrypted on the fly when you're deploying. And you can do the same for keys. So if we, that was just encrypt the config or the config, and then it will just decrypt the value or encrypt the value of that key in the config file. And then for deployments, it's just running the deploy local environment. So, and you will get all these tasks for every environment that you add basically. And it's just, you can either just use the directory structure, or you can start by adding environments in this build section. But I found that it's the easiest to just base it on convention and what is available in the repo, and not have it double. So if we create a new directory here, let's say that, and we'll just copy these ones. Okay, I'm sharing an encryption key here. Don't do that at home. Okay. Then we just have all the tasks that we already had for the local environment for the other one.
Okay. Thank you. I see. You know, this kind of reminds me of KSonnet, which is now deprecated, and SkyConfig, which was, I don't know if you've seen these. SkyConfig was announced at the, not China, but the last US KubeCon.
Okay.
It's not the same language, similar idea. It is written in Skylark. It was originally a different name, and I think it was Sky something, I think, but it's been renamed Starlark, I think. And it's a subset of Python. And so it's a similar idea and a subset of Python. I dropped a link into chat there. The folks at Stripe came up with this.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also doing something like step. So then I'm also doing something like stage deployment, so you can have that you can use to rotate traffic more and more to a new version. just with some annotations, and then we can implement something to do the health check or whatever. I didn't see this one.
Okay. Yeah.
And what I'm also adding, like pre and post processors. So basically, you could have some extra annotations on your directory structure. So, for example, if you put some convention in your package structure and say, okay, everything in this package is in namespace this, you can just leave out the metadata part, or have the name part come from some extra parameter on the annotation. You could also do something like labeling. It's a backend, and apply some strategy for Prometheus metrics. For example, if it's Spring Boot, for example, you could automatically do all the annotations and config for Spring Boot for Prometheus, stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Preprocessors, and then post processors you could use for policies or something. Check that everything has resource limits and so on. And I'm also seeing like Lumi. They take I think it's broader. They do everything also for the infrastructure, I think.
Okay.
Very interesting space.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Does anyone have any questions about what they've seen so far? Silence. Okay. Yeah, there's a couple of things that I've seen like this and we've demoed in the past. So
Okay.
thank you. I can see where this would be useful for, especially for the Java folks, and there are quite a lot of Java folks out there.
Yeah, I mean it's like we have like 3 backends and 2 frontends, and everything from the deployment we only specify once, and like we have a QMD sidebar for logging, and yeah, we only have one definition of that, and we just use a function to wire the container through. So we only have one specification of that. Previously, we had to copy it like 5 times, and yeah. Even if for a small project like ours, it's probably making us faster in tweaking these things. So yeah, it's
All
proving
right.
how helpful for us.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. The next thing we have on our agenda is to talk about KubeCon. Unless other folks had questions about, and feel free to put them into the chat as we're going along. So if there were any other questions about this, or if you wanted to go take a look, there is a link to the demo Kubrig in today's meeting minutes, and feel free to answer any questions in text or possibly reach out offline. The next thing we have is KubeCon. I was not able to attend, but there's 2 things that came out of it. And so before I go with the things that Adnan added in here, because he's not able to be here today, was there anybody who had anything they wanted to add about KubeCon in general, or if they were able to make the SIG Apps session?
Yeah, I was at the SIG Apps session.
Okay, what did you think of it? Did you get anything out of it? Were there any thoughts you had on doing it next time? Any particular topics? Just anything at all?
Yeah, I think it went okay. I mean, we booked out like it was like an hour or so session, a bit longer, but it ended a bit earlier than that, as the conversation kind of petered out quite quickly, I think. There was I think most of the people there weren't that full of questions, really. So having the kind of audience drive the conversation didn't work that well, particularly. And maybe instead of just being as broad as it's like, what do you want to talk about? It might have been a bit better if we had some like kind of topics to talk about, maybe like beforehand, to kind of interest people and expand on those or go deeper into them or something would have been my kind of feedback, I guess.
Yeah, and so to
Oh,
give a little
yeah.
back, oh, go ahead. Sorry, somebody else had something.
Yeah, I was there also. Mate here. So, I told with that approach. Adnan and were hoped they certain amount in about 30 minutes. We questions
Hey, Macha, you're kind of
to
breaking up a little bit.
the audience.
Hello, you're kind of breaking up.
Yeah,
I can't really hear
sorry.
you. Sorry, it's very stuttery.
How about now? Trying to be in, but I see that there are problems with my connection. Is it better
Yeah,
now?
it's a tiny bit better. I think we can hear you now.
Okay, so basically, I agree with that one. Maybe we could have a little bit more material, different material, depending on if the discussions are happening, then cool, just go with the discussions. But in case the discussions are not there, or they will end up sooner, we can cover other topics. So probably that the my advice for next time, and I'm honestly I'll planning to do something similar for 6CLI.
So, talking to Adnan about this, one of the things that he noticed was the same problem, and we talked a little bit about it, such as when we first started doing these years ago. One of the big ideas was to get people together to have conversations, and you'd have conversations on a variety of things. In fact, I remember back in, I think it was Seattle, not the last Seattle one, but the one before that, where we had different people at different tables discussing different topics. The Kubernetes community that shows up and is engaged at these conferences has radically changed since then, though, right? People who are kind of at the core of things are far more stretched and extended than they used to be. They don't have as when I attend, I don't have nearly the free time that I did back in the day to have those side conversations. And a lot of people are in those same positions. And so the ability to have those conversations and to show up may not be there. Plus, there's a whole lot of brand new people who are trying to learn stuff, either about workloads or how to get involved with a particular SIG or something like that. And so it might be a different audience than we were targeting. Even some of the guidance says to kind of target with the way we approach these. And so Adnan was suggesting we do something different as well to try to handle that same thing. And now they want to be recorded. And so you can't have a bunch of small conversations around the room and do a good job recording it too, right? And so there's something that needs to be different.
Also, there was a question with regards to how to contribute to SIG apps per se. I remember pointing them to the presentation that I was giving some time ago about writing controllers, and to the sample controller that we have. Maybe one of the options could be a code walkthrough, just to explain how a sample controller could look like, how does it look like, and then maybe some kind of a poll at the beginning of the meeting, how many people are interested in this topic or the other one, and then maybe covering a few of them and having like sections for different areas that people, depending on what people will be interested in. Or maybe the poll could be even done beforehand on the SIG apps mailing list. I don't know, just throwing thoughts.
Maybe, yeah. I'm not sure if the SIG Apps mailing list folks would mirror the people who would attend, but at the same time, getting kind of a poll would be a good idea. Adnan suggested something similar with a code walkthrough of maybe controllers, and so there might be something there, quite frankly, if two of you are suggesting it. That's a good idea to keep in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I can help you with that one as well. I have some already talks that I've given before about, and I wrote like the job and crunch of controllers. I'm always using those as examples. So yeah, I'm more happy to help with those.
All right, thank you. Did anyone else have any other ideas or thoughts on how to handle this next time? Or any thoughts from this last one as well? Going once, twice, 3 times. All right, then we'll move on to the next topic. And the next topic, I kind of wanted to throw an idea out there. And I don't know whether this is a Kubernetes idea or an ecosystem idea, but just an idea to throw out there. I'm coming back to the application, so I'll share my screen here real quick. Let me find it. Let me know when y'all can see it. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right, fantastic.
Yep.
So here's the idea. I was looking at Kubernetes, and we have a huge surface area. All right. So I went to our API docs, and this is for 1.13. I did it before 1.14 came out, just before, and I hit print to PDF. And then I thought my computer was broken. And about 5 minutes later, a PDF showed up. And it turned out to be over 2,000 pages to print our API doc site. And I said, all right. I'm going to pull out everything deprecated because we've got lots of things, right? You've got deployment, from the extensions API. You've got lots of duplication in there. And it reduced it down a lot to over 1,300 pages. And this is all of the stuff that is the current non-deprecated. And I said, all right, if somebody's just going to deploy an app or a workload, I'm going to get rid of everything that you may not need for that stuff, right? There's stuff with nodes and stuff like that. I don't need those objects. So I'm going to just reduce it to stuff I may use when doing apps. And I came in just shy of 1,200 pages when I print to PDF. And that was the first inclination that maybe we have a gigantic surface area for the Kubernetes API that you need to work with, right? Because I don't know about you, to me, that's a huge surface area. And that's just core Kubernetes, right? That's just the core Kubernetes. And so I started poking around. I went to the Kubernetes, I went to the Helm community charts, and I said, all right, what do we got here? And there's 336 charts. I said, all right, we've got deployments, stateful sets, daemon sets. But how often do people use things like pod disruption budgets? Because if you have a huge surface area, how much of it are they digging into? And I started digging into some of these things. And really with all those deployments, and all those stateful sets, especially the deployments, I would have expected more horizontal pod auto-scaling, right? Because those are the kinds of things that are perfect to auto-scale. And quite often, you can get basic stuff with Kubernetes out of the box. But I didn't see a lot of people using these. And I was surprised by it, even though they're newer objects. And I started to wonder, what does it have to do with the surface area? Is there a point where people hit in their surface area that they say, I've done enough to get it going, now I'm not going to move on to that complexity. And I even went on to GitHub. Now, these estimates are scoped to YAML, but you see similar things. And I included volume claim templates in here, along with persistent volume claim, because a lot of people are going to use the volume claim templates, which are not an object of their own, but you end up using them. And I started looking here and I say, okay, look at how many deployments are out there. I would have expected more secrets, definitely more pod disruption budget and horizontal pod autoscaler. How are people doing these things? What does this mean to the API service area when it's so big? And so maybe they use just the basics to get things done, right? So I started looking at this and just going, it's big, it's bothersome. And this is, of course, just Kubernetes. What happens if you had Istio or Crossplane or any of the other CRT-based things out there? Those just expand the surface area that somebody needs to know to work with the API. And as I've gone around just talking to people, I'm finding as I bring up, I might talk to a group of 5 or 6 people, like my coworkers or something, and I'll ask them, what about this object and this object? And they don't know, and they don't know about these fields on them, and they realize just how big the surface area is for things they don't know. And, there's just so much, right? I mean, once you add Istio in, you're probably back up near 2,000 printed pages if you were to print it out again, just to give that idea. And so I asked the question, does smaller YAML help? And for those, I looked at multiple tools out there that have tried to do this. There's Kedge. Kedge is a Red Hat project. It hasn't had any activity in over a year, but they did shrink down the amount of YAML to do things, and they had examples on there. Then there's a project called SciCube, who tried to do the same thing, but they've had stagnant activity and it didn't really take off. And so you see this idea of let's just shrink down the infrastructure YAML, didn't work. So smaller infrastructure YAML did not take off. In fact, when I start looking at this, I can't find projects that were really successful in trying to shrink the amount. And that led me to the question of, well, what about, is it Kubernetes surface area? Is that the problem? Application developers and operators now need to go learn Kubernetes-isms, and it's huge, right? It's just a huge onboarding task. I was talking to somebody I used to work with, and she said, everybody should go through Kubernetes training. And I said, how long should the training be? She said, a week, we'll get everybody to train. And I said, okay, this application over here has like 1,000 people working on it. Should all 1,000 people who are working on this application who need to do it take a week off from working on their application to take a week training? And that's just to get you into it. And all of a sudden, the amount of cost and time and training to get the surface area, came to light. And it's like, wow, that's a big cost. And that's a lot of surface area. And then Stripe did something interesting. This is one of the things they did. They developed, and you can see up here, this was the quote from their blog. They didn't want their app developers to have to learn Kubernetes internals. So they created a YAML-based system to do their cron. This was the cron system that they wanted to do, and you didn't have to go learn Kubernetes-isms. They went and generated it. Now, their second takeoff of it was actually skyconfig, right? They did this afterwards where they kind of backed off the need to not know Kubernetes internals. I'm curious how that went. I haven't had a chance to talk with them recently, but coming back to this original idea caught my attention because you don't have to know Kubernetes. They can go generate the Kubernetes objects based on this. Then it also got me thinking about Heroku, and Cloud Foundry has something quite like this, where they have a very, very simple app JSON that you can define your application with, and it's focused on the app and the app's need. Cloud Foundry is another example that does this. Now, granted, these are PaaSes, and so they're going to do a lot more for you, but the idea with these two was to focus on the application rather than piles of infrastructure stuff. Now, you get some of it in there, like domain names and things like that, but it's a lot less, right? It's a smaller amount of stuff. And I know because I've worked with Cloud Foundry stuff a lot. In fact, if rumors are true, they may even be building Heroku now on top of Cloud Foundry stuff or looking at that because they are hiring Cloud Foundry or Kubernetes people. But the essential part of these, right, is that they're not describing the infrastructure, they're describing the application, and from that, you can generate what you need, right? That's the core essential part here. You've got app people focusing on app stuff. And so imagine for a moment, you have an application developer could define a configuration for an application, not the infrastructure it needs, a description of the application and what the application needs. And then you could generate Kubernetes infrastructure stuff from that. Whatever it is, for maybe you've got to pass in some stuff about the environment or ops, but you could generate it. Think about it, generation or compiling, just that whole idea. Now imagine if somebody else came along and said, you know what, we want to go run the same application, but we're going to, instead of using Ingress, we're going to use Istio. And you can say, okay, from that basic config, instead of generating an Ingress in that setup for Nginx Ingress, we're going to generate everything for Istio. And you didn't have to change anything else the app developer needed to know. In fact, they could have had it small, concise, and then you generate the stuff, right? That idea, just imagine that for a moment, because it puts the onus on app people needing to know app stuff, and then you generate what you need for the platform. And so the question that I'm left wondering is this an experiment for the ecosystem or an experiment for Kubernetes itself to take on? I don't know if we have everybody here to answer that question, but I'm curious what you all think of this idea, and yeah.
Yeah, Matt, I think that's also where I'm trying to take Kubri. Because what you see now is just level 1, but you can build anything on top of it. That's also where I'm thinking you can take the preprocessors. Now it's generating Ingress with Nginx, or it's doing something with Istio. You could just swap that out, and you shouldn't care as dev. And yeah, that's also something I think. Well, my gut feeling is that as a platform, you won't be able to cope with every case out there. That's also why I'm targeting codes and not YAML, because it's way more flexible to do stuff, and people can just take the DSL and build stuff on it.
So one of the things that came to mind for me, especially when I saw skyconfig, right? I mean, with that, they talk about things like deployments and stuff like that, which are Kubernetes objects. Mm-hmm. And so you do need to know a certain amount of the Kubernetes internals. But they are a Python shop, or they've got a lot of Python knowledge. And so you've got a lot of people who know Python there. And so it's a subset of Python. But then I thought, where I'm at, we aren't a big Python shop. In fact, we've got a number of languages, but Python probably isn't in the top 4. And so for us, Python doesn't work. And Java is going to work for some folks, Java-based systems, but not for others. And so this is kind of where I was going with the language-based. It made me wonder if maybe not YAML or JSON, because you can get some of the autocomplete actions and stuff with like JSON schemas. Could be more, and you can get validation, could provide something that goes across more languages. Because part of it is,
that's
right? And
Yeah,
that, at least that's where I was wondering. Yeah.
That's also just because of my background. I'm heavily fond of type safety. And that's also why I've got built the generator, because you can just generate add CRDs to your cluster, generate the DSL for you with the CRDs, and go from there. Yeah, that's just my background.
Yeah, and I get it, and I work with a lot of people who don't have my background, so I'm always trying to figure out how do I help people who have got different backgrounds from mine. That's one of the things that I've been trying to think about with this a lot lately. Anybody else have any other ideas on this? I'm curious if there's any other takes on this.
Our company, we have a very varied set of languages as well. So we've got like Clojure, Ruby, Elixir, Golang, you name it. So we have a pretty varied set of devs. And actually what we found good about Kubernetes is that it is a common language for you to define all your languages in. And it's the common YAML, I guess, is actually the advantage we have there. And generally we've stayed away as much as possible from doing any like DSL style stuff around Kubernetes, and kept it to the point where instead we've tried to simplify the extraneous stuff. So it's more like a developer should be in charge of defining like a deployment, a service, and ingress, let's say. But anything else around that would be like metrics, logging, auto scaling, getting like secrets for your credentials, load balancing across clusters, all the stuff they really don't want to deal with. We've kind of focused the effort on that level instead of on the deployment level. We found the deployment level's the bit they find easiest, especially coming from somewhere like ECS, where they're used to defining a task. Now I define a deployment instead.
Now, quick question, Warren. Are these the same folks who write the application, or the same one who wrote, say, a task? Or are these a different, more of an operations group?
And it's the same. Like historically, all our developers were responsible for their like ECS clusters as well. So we are definitely a company that's a bit more used to having developers run ops compared to others. So.
Yeah, that's also something that I see. I have a developer background myself, so I've come up with the DSL stuff and type safety stuff. But there's also a larger project with two enabling teams that do everything from platform stuff, and they just create some custom JSON, and they just have a 4-line JSON to do a deployment, for example, and everything comes out of it. That's also I think based where it's based on people's backgrounds, they are more happy with simple JSON stuff or YAML stuff instead of code. That's just something that I notice.
Okay. Yeah, maybe this is the kind of thing that should be an experiment in the ecosystem, so it can run up against everyone else's experiments, and you can see how things go.
Yeah, because I think they made it quite complex. They've got like site deployments to Nexus and zip files with templates to put it in, and yeah, it's a crazy Jenkins pipeline library they created. I'm not a really big fan of that because it's just a lot of trial and error, and it's not really easy to develop locally. That's also from my background. And really helps a lot there because you can just develop it locally, debug it, and have some more control.
Yeah, I do think that's a big point of being able to develop on things locally.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. We have a few more things, so we'll try to jump over to those real quick here. Thanks everyone for the discussion on that. The next one up we have there is the KEP review on Max Unavailable. Did somebody want to, let's see, still on?
Hey, Matt. Yeah, I'm still here. I just started listening. Yeah, so I missed most of the conversation if you guys were discussing that earlier.
Yeah, we haven't discussed your stuff yet, so.
No, I mean, my main thing was that, yeah, I think I asked for review last time also, but I'm still waiting for it. So.
Sorry. I was expecting Ken to review that. Janet was one of the co-chairs for KubeCon and EU. And so she has been out. She was the other person on it. I don't think she's back in the office until today, actually.
Okay.
Okay. So that's part of the reason you haven't got it from her. I was hoping Ken would get a chance to look at this. In fact, it's assigned to him, so we need to go bug him on it. He's the one that I was expecting to take a look.
Sure.
Let's go bug him. I was actually hoping he'd be here today, so we could bug him on it. But yeah, that's what's up with it. I wanted one of them to review it before we move forward on it.
Sounds good.
And that's been the trouble. So I'll shoot an email off to them after this meeting to see if we can get that moving.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. And then there was somebody who added sidecars. Are they on?
Yep, that was me. Yeah, it was just a update on we'd been waiting a while for an API reviewer to look at the sidecar KEP API proposal, which after I pestered Tim at KubeCon, he's gone and done for us. So he's given that an approval. It needs like a SIG Apps lead to actually approve it though. We did say that we shouldn't have blocked on like API reviewer is what he was saying. He was saying we should merge based on design and leave API review to the actual like PR stage at Kubernetes, which I don't know, that was his opinion on it. And yeah, and then I just dropped in there's another PR about a test plan for the sidecars, which has been waiting for a review for a while as well, because arguably once those things have been merged, we should have most of the stuff in place. So hopefully we can move it to implementable.
Sounds good. I don't see an issue with it. Again, I want one of the folks who's intimately knowledgeable with the controller to approve it. And so let me get on that. I'll fire off an email. Again, this is where I'd go after Ken and Janet on this. So I'll go chase them down and see what we can do moving on these. I'm happy to fire off an email on those. They look good to me, but I do want the final sign off from them.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. So that's what we have today. Did anybody have any other topics? Anything else? Going once, going twice, 3 times, everyone. Thank you for coming. We'll be back here next week. Have a wonderful week, y'all. Bye.
Bye.
About something about generating infra from app. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yes, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about generating infra stuff from app. I barely heard that. If there is a doc, I'm happy to read, but if you want to repeat, that's fine as well.
Oh, yeah. So the idea here was, and I'll walk through just real quick again for you. Where it was? I'm going to share my screen real quick. So the idea was Kubernetes has a massive surface area. I took the API and I went and I printed it to PDF, and it just has a huge surface area, over 1,000 pages. If you remove all of the deprecated things that are still in the API and anything you wouldn't use for a workload, it was over 1,000 pages, close to 1,200 pages of information. And then you start looking around at things like in the community charts, or if you search GitHub, you actually find that once you get past the basic things like a deployment or stateful set, a lot of the other objects aren't used nearly as much as they could or probably should be used, which kind of gets into the whole giant API surface area. There's just a lot to learn. And then, of course, this is all just Kubernetes without Istio, Crossplane, or any of the other CRD-based things you might use, which just expand the surface area and the knowledge that you need to have in order to interact with it. There's just a lot to learn. And so I asked a question to smaller YAML help. Well, Kedge and SciCube both tried to solve that, and they didn't get massive uptake, even though they did make things smaller. And they really haven't had much activity either. They've been kind of, well, neither one of them's had much activity in over a year. So I would say that smaller Infra YAML didn't take off. But one of the things that caught my attention was from Stripe and how they handled cron. They didn't want their developers to have to understand Kubernetes internals to use the system, so they came up with a simpler format for cron. And granted, their next go at this was skyconfig, which again required you to know Kubernetes-isms, and instead you were doing it in a subset of Python. But this go here really caught me because it was the idea that your app developers didn't need to know the complexities of Kubernetes. And then this drew me into looking at things like, here's a brief snippet of Heroku's app.json. Cloud Foundry has something similar, although it's YAML. And it's a simple description that, for the most part, describes the app. There's a couple things in there, like instances and stuff like that. But the big target is the application. And granted, these are PaaSes, but it's that idea that, okay, an app person deploying an app deals with app things. And so if you look at the cron and the app, the essential part about these is that they describe the application rather than the infrastructure, which is what we tend to deal with the long-form Kubernetes stuff. And this then, had me imagine for a moment, you have an app developer who describes their application in a simple configuration. It's configuration describing and targeting the application, not the infrastructure. Then you use something that, you generate the Kubernetes infrastructure from it. And maybe you got to pass in some environment and ops information, but you're able to generate all the long-form Kubernetes from that. And then if you had something like Istio later, you could regenerate it with Istio. And so something like an ingress then would be replaced by the Istio CRDs in the generated material, but your application description didn't have to change. It's the generated material that changed.
Got it. I think, yeah, that makes sense. So you found Stripe to be doing that, and that triggered this thought process. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I'm finding that onboarding people to Kubernetes is difficult because of the sheer amount of information that people have to learn to onboard to Kubernetes. One of the stories I related was I was talking to somebody I used to work with, and she suggested get a bunch of people in for training. And I said, okay, this application has 1,000 people on it. And she was suggesting maybe, a week's worth of training. And I go, can you have 1,000 people stop to take a week's worth of training in order to learn the basics of the Kubernetes-isms? And quite frankly, probably the basics of the Kubernetes-isms, you're talking about just the left side, and you're not even getting into the more complex things, right?
So I think that makes sense. Target, the retailer, also, I think did a presentation somewhere in Google Cloud Next, where they talked about their Target application platform, which I felt was basically a PaaS on top of Kubernetes. So they don't have a declarative API, I believe, but they have a GUI where they basically ask a bunch of questions, and based on that, they generate all their CI, CD, and the Kubernetes configuration that would be needed to get that app up. And the questions they ask are basically like what kind of framework you want to use and some very basic stuff. And so I'm from Salesforce, and we are also thinking something similar, where basically we're saying we want a lot of people to be doing microservices internally, and we want something that doesn't require people to learn about either Kubernetes or Terraform or infrastructure as a code, or how do we do Jenkins and stuff like that. So basically we are thinking about a PaaS YAML, some very similar to what Heroku does, and then basically figure out or generate all the Terraform, Spinnaker, or anything related to that automatically for the application developers. So they don't have to care about all the internal details for some time at least, until they become experts.
Yeah, and my thought had been, if you could assume a container, so if we just assume containers is the basic, and I don't know if that's right, but that's the assumption, and then you have a spec that defines what's in it, you could have 1, 2, 3, 4 things that generate different things out of it, and then you just have a common spec. And then it's not a requirement that you have a specific tool implementation. And so different people could generate different things from that common spec, depending on their needs.
Yep, that makes sense. Yeah.
So I'm thinking of getting going on that as an experiment here in the next few weeks. And so maybe I'll go work on something and share it. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how my time works out. But yeah, I'd be interested if others, and thanks for bringing up what Target did. I'll go see if I can find a video from that presentation or some more details on their platform. I'd be curious to know how this stuff's going and working and what folks think of it.
I can share a link in the.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you. Is there anything else? Thanks, everyone, for coming, and have a wonderful week.
Yep. Bye.